Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, May 24th, 2019.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I feel outnumbered because I have two Mets fans as opposed to one Yankees fan. And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, where the New York Yankees are in first place in the AL East.
Blah, 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 blah,
They don't give out many trophies.
Unless you, like, for you, I'll give it to you. Guys who became fans in '95, honestly, you're not fans.
Oh, no,
you're
no.
Not.
I hope
you're not fans. Unless you watch the Andy Stankiewicz, Stump Merrill, Mel Hall with the batting gloves around the bases. Don't start talking to me that you're a Yankee fan.
I hold them in as much disdain as you do. Who every Mets fan who started following the Mets when it was Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry and Gary Carter, you had to pay the dues of Doug Falcone,
Pete Falcone, Doug Flynn,
Bruce John Stearns.
I like John Stearns.
But that was that Lenny Randall. Those were the you had to pay your dues
with the Mets and script on the chest.
Yeah, I just have to say this. I was at the Marlies Charlotte game 4 yesterday, and it's always interesting to look into the crowd and see how many Austin Matthews jerseys, how many Don Tavares jerseys, Mitch Marner, and I scan the crowd and there's a guy, and you guys don't even know this guy's name. A defenseman who played for the Leafs in the early 80s. I think he was Czech. His name was Slava Duras. Okay. And there was somebody wearing a Slava Duras jersey. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? The last time this happened, I was at Air Canada Center, and there was some sort of public event during a Leaf morning skate. And there's this guy walking around in a Peter Ing jersey. Peter Ing was a goaltender.
Yeah, I know he was.
Yeah, who got traded in the Grant Fuhr deal in the early 90s. I'm like, who the hell would be wearing a Peter Ing jersey? Well, it was Peter Ing. That's why.
Is that the only way people will recognize him is if he wears his own jersey?
Yeah, I don't even think Mr. and Mrs. Ing were wearing the Peter Ing jersey. Anyway, let's get to the news of the day. Russ, it broke after we ended the show yesterday, this rumor regarding Phil Kessel. I think it was Mike Russo from The Athletic, and it sort of grew from there. Josh Yohe in Pittsburgh wrote about it, and so did, I think, Pierre LeBrun. The rumored deal was Phil Kessel with Jack Johnson going to the Minnesota Wild for Jason Zucker and Victor Rask. Mm-hmm. This deal is sort of fraught with peril on both sides. That's why there might be something to it. What do you think of it? And we know that Kessel's got a limited no trade list, and Minnesota is on the no trade part of it. So this might not happen. But what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's the worrisome thing. It's like Vinny Lecavalier getting rumored to be traded to the Canadiens, and he had no interest in playing there. Mm-hmm. I think it's just talk. I think all it shows is what we had been saying on the show for a while, that Kessel's going to get traded. It won't be Malkin. It'll be Kessel. And it just shows that that's being talked about, but I don't think that trade will happen.
Yeah, I mean, Russ, Jan, the thing that confuses me about this deal, because I look at it from the Pittsburgh perspective, they want to get rid of Kessel, but Kessel has 3 years left at 6.8. His contract was shaved off by the Leafs when they traded him a few years ago. Jack Johnson, that contract is a disaster, and I think he has 4 years left. The AAV is low; it's under $4 million, but he was a scratch in the playoffs for them. On the other side, I think Zucker is a 30 to 35 goal scorer. I mean, I think he's really good, but for some reason Minnesota wants to trade him. And Victor Rask, I mean, that was the only disaster of Paul Fenton's trades last year, because they traded Niederreiter. He played a lot better with Carolina. Rask didn't do anything with Carolina, but Rutherford, I believe, was the GM that drafted him, so he's probably willing to take a risk on him. What do you think of this deal in terms of how it breaks down if it happens?
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, you mentioned a couple things. So first of all, I'm not sure if Fenton did well on a lot of his trades last year, because I'm not necessarily in love with the Coyle trade. I'm not necessarily 100% in love with the Granlund trade, and clearly the Niederreiter trade. I think we all think that he did a pretty lousy job of trading him. And Zucker they signed coming off that big year. Now, if you're going to go out and get Jack Johnson, in essence, you're getting a guy where you're throwing money out. You're bringing in Kessel. You're hoping, obviously, that he gets to play with a couple of the guys that are there in Minnesota that could continue, enable him to continue the level of scoring that he has, either skating mostly on the line with Malkin, occasionally with Crosby. I'm not quite sure if that's 100% the case. Salary-wise, in terms of Zucker and Kessel, it's relatively a wash, although Kessel has 1 year left on his deal than Zucker did. So I'm not quite – the Rask Johnson part, I guess you're exchanging bad contract for bad contract, but right now I'm not quite sure which one's the worst contract of the two. And are you really making your team markedly better by making a deal like this? Personally, at this point in time, look, I love Kessel, and he fits very well in Pittsburgh. I'm not quite sure how well he'll fit in Minnesota. And why would you get rid of a guy like Zucker to begin with, who has shown his growth over the last couple of years and have been a kind of guy that you think is a core member of this team? Now you're really breaking up the team as a whole, and what's going to be, you're going to have Suter, Parise, and then what else is going to kind of be the backbone or fabric of your team?
I agree. I don't understand why they want to trade Zucker, but I have a feeling it has to do with budget because he's got 4 more years at $5.5 million. But you're getting results out of the guy. He is somebody who can score.
Well, I can give you two things. Luke Cunnin will be one of those building blocks that with the team he's playing in the World Championships. If he's healthy, he's going to score 25 goals. So that's where I think they can make it up, and then maybe they're looking a year down the line for Kaprizov, and maybe they can, mend fences there. I don't know.
If they can bring him in, but I think you and I both agree that the likelihood of him coming over, I think, drops a little bit every single time another day goes by where you get the impression that he doesn't want to come over.
Well, I mean,
you would know better than I do. I just don't get the impression he really, really wants to come over.
Maybe he
doesn't. I
doesn't.
think he does, and Fenton did meet with him last year, so I think it's still 50-50. I think it's a better chance he comes over with Fenton than he would have with Fletcher there.
I agree with that. No, I agree with that.
Yeah, and looking at Minnesota right now, you've got 3 players in Fiala, Eriksson, and Donato who are all RFAs. They're probably going to all be bridge deals. You're probably going to spend a couple $1 million on each of them. So if they're going to sign those guys to bridge deals, then and they have a budget, then they may feel that they can trade Zucker to clear money. But the thing is, they're taking back the cap hits on that deal. If that deal happens, is about the same. Kessel's 6'8". Johnson
less the money. I thought it's 6'8" net or 6'8", then less the 1.2 million that Toronto.
No, it was 8.
So it's 6.8. Okay.
So it's 6.8. Johnson is 3.25 for another 4 years. Zucker is 5.5 for another 4 years, and let's see here. Rask. He's on. He has $4 million for another 3 years. So money-wise, it breaks down pretty similarly. It's about $10 million each.
Look, you're exchanging bad deal for bad deal right now. Rask had a good year a couple of years ago with Carolina. Johnson, I think we all had the same view when he was signed by Pittsburgh to begin with, which seemed to be the same view that every Penguin fan had. The question is what are you gaining in the Zucker for Kessel swap in terms of that trade? Is it something that's really making your team better?
Well, they feel like they're getting more goals out of it. That's what they'd be.
But Zucker scored also.
I know, but Kessel could score 40.
Zucker had what, 30-something?
I think. Well, not last year.
No, 2 years ago he scored in the 30s. Did he not?
Yeah, but I think what Pittsburgh is gaining is not having Phil Kessel.
Oh yeah, I'm not arguing from the Pittsburgh perspective, right? Pittsburgh's view is I think that Zucker is a better fit right now potentially in that roster in terms of then Kessel, though again that remains to be seen.
You could get 35, 40 goals.
And then the question is where are you fitting in Rask on that team to begin with? Is he a 3C really there?
Yes.
Yeah, he's taken Brassard's spot. That's a rotating spot the last 3 years.
Yeah,
that would allow. We got Bukestad in that role, so I guess you're moving Bukestad to wing.
Yes, yeah. He played the wing in Florida for a long time, so he could comfortably make that move. So I mean, we don't know if that deal is going to. Usually, when a deal splashes like that in terms of a rumor and it's so widely out there, it doesn't happen. But I think we're safe to say that Kessel is going to be one of the big names that potentially could get moved at the draft, before the draft, after the draft. I have nothing against Phil Kessel. He's a very talented player, but he wears on teams after a while. And I look at Pittsburgh, and they're looking 3 years left, 31 years old, $6.8 million. If he loses a step, even though he's a durable guy and he's played I think 600 straight games or something like that, if he loses a step, he's not going to be the same player. I think they want to be proactive on that and move him before he loses.
Yeah, but he's still got a great shot, and we have to remember he's worth more to Minnesota in that market than he definitely is to Pittsburgh, because Minnesota, if you go into next year and people think it's the same old, they might start losing attendance. You bring in Kessel, he'll bring in people.
Yeah. Now, we were looking at some teams that might be in situations that are not optimum, and we talked about the Brock Nelson deal, and I was talking to some people at the game last night, and they were shaking their head at how bad that deal was. It's front loaded, $6 million for a guy who, last year he had 50 plus points. That was in the absence of Tavares, but he was pretty much a 40 to 45 point guy when Tavares was there. So he was, a second to third line guy, and moved up a little bit with Tavares leaving. And what kind of effect that paying $6 million to Nelson would have on Anders Lee. But Russ, you think that it's going to have effects on other people as well?
Yeah, first off, with Nelson, at least you've got somebody steady there. You know what you're going to get in Nelson. You know you're going to get 20 goals, maybe more. You know what his point total is. He's a constant. You don't have to worry about him. He was the easiest of all the guys to sign. So Lou signed him. Mm-hmm. Now the harder ones are Anders Lee and Robin Lehner. We don't really hear that much about Robin Lehner because, everybody probably figures, well, he did great with the Islanders. He wants to stay. Yeah, he does. But this is his last shot at a good free agent contract while he's coming off a great year. So this is not going to be cheap for the Islanders, and he's going to want some term, and the Islanders may not be interested in the same term he is. And so this could drag on a bit with Lehner. Lee, nobody really knows. I mean, if you had to make a guess, he's going to make somewhere between 7 and 8 a year. He's certainly not taking 6, and he's going to want something like 5 to 7 years. And I think he's probably looking more like 6 instead of 5. These are all going to be sticking points that really could hold up the works for the Islanders, and they may go on and sign other players while they're negotiating with them because, A, they'll always have the cap space. They're not close to the cap. But B, because these guys are going to take a while. Yeah,
I mean, remember, Lehner signed a 3-year deal with the Sabres first it was a 3-year deal with the Senators. Then he was traded. He was making about $2.25. Then he had a 1-year extension with the Sabres. It was I think it was a settlement of a qualifying offer, before going to arbitration. And then he signs as a UFA when they don't qualify him for $1.5 million with the Islanders. Now he's a Vezina nominee. He's a UFA at 27 years old in a goaltending market where there are a lot of teams that are looking for either 1As or 1Bs. He's going to get at least $4 million. He's going to get that the equivalent, maybe even more. It's going to be on a short-term deal, but he's going to get that. So, I mean, I don't know what the Islanders, unless the Islanders, Jan, are in on Bobrovsky and they're going to spend their money elsewhere. I don't know why there would be not a lot of progress on a contract for Lehner.
I think Bobrovsky, I think most of us feel he's going to end up with Florida. I mean, that seems to be the likely landing spot. Sure. And with Lehner, he and Eberle share an agent. I mean, I'm not sure if one is impacting the other, or probably shouldn't. I think Lehner is much more of a priority right now than Eberle. Eberle coming off a 6x6 contract. There's no way, in my opinion, he's worth that kind of a money. Again, even beyond term, let alone dollars, right? And granted, the right side for the Islanders is kind of weak, and they could use him. I think Lee is going to be a priority. He's your captain. He's a guy you want to sign. I think the Nelson contract may help level set in terms of what you're going to give Lee. But Lehner, I mean, you have to evaluate, was last year just the fact that he was working with Mitch Korn, that he got his life in order in the offseason after all the drama that he unfortunately had before that while he was part of Buffalo. Yeah. Is he the kind of guy that maybe has finally finding his sea legs? You got Ilya Sorokin, who won't be over probably for about another year or so. At that point in time, I think Grice's deal may be up. I'm going to check, but I think Grice has either 1 or 2 more years left in his deal. And Lehner proved that he could be the guy last year. Now, granted, he and Grice split time, but he proved that if you wanted to ride him and make him a number one, he had the potential to be a number one goalie, given what we saw last year. So I would think Lehner is most probably looking to strike it rich, especially only getting, I think it was a 1-year deal with $1.5 million or so last year. So he's going to be looking to try to hit the big time money. There's not much out there in free agency that really interests you or somebody you'd look at as a long-term option. So Leonard's probably got to be looking for at least a 4-year deal. The Islanders are probably looking maybe at a 3-year deal, and I think the dollars are going to be the challenging part to reach an accord at, given the kind of performance he had this year. He's going to probably look to make more than Grice is making, and I'm assuming more than Philippe Grubauer making, which is $3 million a year.
Yeah.
So the question is Lamoriello willing to go to that level to keep him?
Yeah, I think Leonard even wants more than 4. I mean, you look at these backup deals or the 1A deals, and those guys are getting 3. So I think 4, if the Islanders went 4, they'd have to probably go a higher AAV than what he's asking for more years. But I think 4 is probably the minimum.
Yeah, I mean, and really, I mean, what other than Bobrovsky, what is the competition in terms of unrestricted goaltenders? Varlamov, who was the backup, who ended up being the backup in Colorado, and in basically the last month and through the playoffs. I mean, there's not if for a team that needs a number 1 goaltender, yes, they could go out and they could trade for Georgiev, or they could trade for a Cal Peterson or some young backup someplace else that they think can be a number 1. But it's going to be challenging, and I think Leonard's going to in a position where he can get pretty good money. Before Jan,
there's one more thought.
Yeah.
Now again, this would have to be a lot of money eaten. Well, you can't though. Look at this. This contract for Schneider is 2022. Never mind.
You're not taking on that contract.
No.
That just
honestly, Russ, after watching him a little bit at the World Championships,
even if they have that, you can't do it.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody, unless New Jersey eats 50% of that contract.
That's what they have to do.
And why would they? Because they would probably rather have him be the backup, the veteran backup to Blackwood than to eat $2 to $3 million on the contract for another whatever how many years is left in that deal. I think they're stuck with him and they're going to keep him.
Hey guys, I'm gonna jet in a minute, but Erik Karlsson just had an interesting tweet. I'll read it to you guys.
Okay.
Maybe something you want to discuss.
Okay.
He sure as heck sounds like he's not coming back to San Jose.
Okay.
Thank you to the entire San Jose Sharks organization, fans, and especially teammates. It was a great run that ended too early, but lots of great memories were created. The entire Bay Area has been nothing but classy and respectful to me and my family. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, nobody expects him to come back. I
don't expect so either, but I think that kind of solidifies that he's going to go to free agency. Now, if there was any question, that kind of tweet kind of, really consecrates that.
Again, before you go, let me ask you this. No. Lou signed the Corey Schneider deal, and it was $66 million through 2022. Now, does that deal look bad? I think it kind of does.
It looks really bad. But again, they wanted to do it because they obviously, when they gave up the 9th pick, which turned out to be Bo Horvat, and oh boy, would they love to have Bo Horvat right now. They kind of had to do it because they were making him their number 1 goalie to take over.
Before you hang up here, Pierre LeBrun this morning and Elliot Friedman on 31 Thoughts yesterday both speculated about Karlsson, saying the top 2 teams were Tampa Bay and the Rangers. Now, Tampa Bay, if he goes there, he's going to have to take less because they, the Florida State tax, that whole situation. But he's going to have to take less than what Hedman's making, which is 7.5. The Rangers could pay him more. The question is, would you want them to?
Most likely not. It's been a big debate on my blog in terms of this. I haven't posted it, but I know it's been the big debate. Look, with all the injuries that he's had, and all the issues. And I know that there was a podcast done by the Hockey News, and they looked at the underlying analytics, and a lot of it showed that he was very similar to what he's done in the past. You watch him on the ice, defensively, he is not the same player as he was before. Yeah. Granted, he upped his, block shots and hits over the last couple of years to be a much more complete defenseman. I'm sorry, there's too big of a risk in terms of the leg injuries. And honestly, Ross, I'll let you talk about it also. Given the Rangers' history with signing big-name defensemen and how well that's turned out for the organization, and I say that firmly tongue-in-cheek, I don't know if I'm going down that route. If I'm signing one guy to a big dollar contract, I'm signing Artemi Panarin and hoping the relationship with John Davidson and him is enough to convince him to come here as opposed to going elsewhere. Not that I'm staying as far away from Karlsson, but unless I'm getting him on a short-term deal in terms of number of years.
Well, that's what I think it would be.
Dollars around the range where he could get in Florida. There's no way I'm going $9 to $11 million to sign him on a long-term deal.
No. They're not going to do a long-term. It would be a short-term. And if they get Panarin, then Karlsson might look that team over and say, yeah, I'll play a few years with Lundqvist because this team might have a shot.
Yep.
That may happen.
Good. I would only go 3-4 years and not at huge dollars either.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Take care, guys.
Yeah, and Russ, I don't know if anybody is going to go through more than 3 or 4 years.
I think right now that's where the starting point is for most teams. I think that now, again, would someone like Arizona say, hey, you know what? Could he be the other guy we're sort of missing to support OEL? You know, maybe that's where you say, could that be, get Arizona to the playoffs? Would they be willing to go an extra year and a little more money because they have the cap space? I don't know. But that's a team that maybe would do it. But the Rangers, no, they would go short term on it. And I think but they would sign Panarin first for sure.
Yeah, and I think what would mitigate the risk with the Rangers in terms of signing Carlson is I think that they would be able to find suitors to take all of Shattenkirk's 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, Shattenkirk's a right-hand shot. He's making 6.6, I believe, or 6.8. I think it's 6.8. But it's short term, and it's not if he returns to the form he was a couple years ago, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility, then that is a low price to pay, because I don't think the Rangers are going to be expected to get a ton back for him. I think they would simply, if they sign Carlson, they're going to dump Shattenkirk.
Yeah, for lack of a better term, that's exactly what would happen.
Now, there's a couple reports here, one from the Edmonton Journal, saying that Dave Tippett is going to be introduced in the next few days as the new Edmonton Oilers head coach.
It's a done deal.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a done deal. Now, nobody's confirming it, but if it's leaking out like that, it sounds like it's a done deal. Complete. What do you think of this?
I mean, ultimately, they needed to get him. Like we talked about it. There weren't a lot of guys left that might be able to pull him out of it. And I think Tippett gives a lot of hope. With Tippett and Holland there, that gives a lot of hope. It doesn't mean they're winning the Stanley Cup next year, but if they can do a few things, and I'm writing about it on Sportsology, I'll put it up later, if they could pull off a few things, you could at least say, hey, maybe they have a chance at the playoffs next year, depending on their cap situation. Like the cap situation is going to be their number one thing they have to target even before getting wingers and wondering about supporting their centers. I will tell you this. It does seem like, from what I'm hearing, like Draisaitl would be back at being center.
And, it has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
And now
good. That's better for them.
Yeah.
And also, it also seems like Nugent Hopkins isn't going anywhere.
No, they and $6 million for him is it's not a bargain, but it's a pretty decent price.
So at least that does give Tippett centers to work with, which works well for his system.
Yeah, the only thing that's a problem there, and it's a good problem to have in a respect, is I don't think Nugent Hopkins or Draisaitl is a number 3, and they're going to have to play in sort of more of a two-way role.
Yeah.
You always move up Nugent Hopkins on shifts to McDavid's line and on the power play that will supplement his offense. But I do think that he's not fitted well to a third line, or either one of them are fitted well to a third line center.
I think that's the least of their worries at this point.
Sure. No, and that's why maybe Nugent Hopkins will play at some point more on the wing. But I mean, honestly, you look at their roster. They have 5 RFA forwards, half of which I don't know if they would even want to qualify. Chason's a UFA. They guys like Kyle Brodziak and Sam Gagne are under contract for another year. And I don't know, the boat anchor that is Milan Lucic, I don't know how you get away from that, so it's.
Well, I'll tell you what, the other thing, and I think this is why Edmonton is willing to spend more money right now on the front office, and they're definitely overpaying for Tippett for sure. They have a Marriott and an LA Live situation opening up there by the arena. And so I think they're expecting brisk business down the road, because then they'll have a lot happening there by the new arena, right? So if you have a lot happening by the new arena and you could get that team to play better, not only would they sell out what's in the arena, but they'll get people hanging out outside, watching, eating, spending money. And I think that's something where that doesn't get talked about a lot, but I think that's playing into this too.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, and I mean, there's an impetus there to make this team better, and I would hope that Holland is being given the tools to sort of facilitate a quicker turnaround. But one way or the other, they're going to have to spend money to either eat salary or get rid of players And I think, in scenarios where they move out of Chris Russell, if they don't buy out, they're going to have to probably attach, like Tampa Bay is going to have to attach a young asset to Ryan Callahan to get him moved.
Yep.
That's 1 year. How do you do it with Lucic for 4 years? It's going to be virtually impossible. So,
it's going to be hard. You're going to have to find somebody that likes Holland, likes what's being offered, and is willing to help out, because most teams won't want to do it.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've heard the rumor of Lucic going back to Boston if you made 50% of what the salary. Boston was not going to be interested in him because he can't move anymore. He'd be just like, even if they swapped 1-for-1 David Backes for Lucic because they have the same cap hit. I mean, you're trading a slow older guy for a slow older guy. What's the difference?
No, that's fair.
Okay, so let's touch on this. It came out yesterday, and a lot of people, as I did when I first sort of glanced at it, that the announcement from the PA and from the NHL regarding the arbiter's decision on Slava Voinov was a rubber stamp of what Bettman did in terms of a year suspension. Right. It is and it isn't, because Bettman suspended him around the All-Star break, around the halfway mark of the season.
Right.
And basically the arbiter decided that the 1 year suspension should be upheld, but time served. So
a tricky time served, yeah.
The time served was at the midpoint of this season, so that means at the midpoint of next year that Voinov is eligible to return. Now, the LA Kings came out minutes after this decision was announced and said, we have no interest in him. Now, the question I have, Russ, is if they have no interest in him, then they shouldn't qualify him because he's a restricted free agent. They should not qualify him and just let him walk.
They won't do that.
Right. I mean, then they do
no team in this era is going to do it.
Yeah, you do have some interest in him. You have interest in getting something for him. So don't act so puritanical and say we don't have any interest in him. You have interest in getting something back for him as an asset.
Right. And that's what they're going to look to do. And he's going to have to play somewhere in order to trade him. Maybe he never plays with the Kings, but he's going to have to play somewhere. So that's where it's going to get tricky. But again, we're going to have to wait 41 games into it to find out what's going to happen. So that's a long wait.
Could he? I mean, I know suspensions, NHL suspensions don't pertain to the AHL. Does that mean he could sign an AHL contract for 41?
That's what I'm guessing, but it's up to Dave Andrews. He might say, no, I don't want him.
Right. But, and this is, and I mentioned this and talked to this over with some reporters last night at the game. What team out there is going to be willing to take our hit? Because it's going to be a cluster. It's going to be something that's going to be like, if Arizona signs him, not to say that nobody cares, but there are 3 reporters covering Arizona. So it's like it'll be a hubbub for a week, and then it'll disappear. If it's New York, if it's Philadelphia, if it's Toronto,
those markets can't touch them.
Yes,
I think it has to be Florida or Arizona. It has to be one of those markets, one of the major metropolitan cities. They can't touch it. They can't. Could it even be Columbus? Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, is it important that there's a Russian presence?
At this point, probably not. At this point, A, he can't worry about that. And B, I think the team is going to get him on such a break that they're not going to care about that. They're just going to see, can he do what he did and how cheap can we get him? That's what it boils down to.
Russ, I honestly, conventional wisdom would say you're right that the big market teams would avoid this like the plague.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, and I'll just use Toronto as an example.
Okay.
They're so desperate right now for help on the right side and you're talking about a 29-year-old former Stanley Cup winner, right-hand shot, who, when he was in the NHL 4 years ago or whatever it was, he was an all-star or all-star level. Now, maybe his play is dropped, and if their pro scouting says he's not even close to being the same player he was, then they won't even be interested.
Chances are it hasn't dropped.
What's that?
Chances are it hasn't dropped, though.
Okay, so if the talent is there, I'm not 100% sure that they wouldn't take a shot.
I don't think they would. I don't think they want that kind of headache. I think that they've got other things to worry about. I think that Babcock wouldn't want to deal with that because I think he would look at that as a potential distraction where he's trying to have a great year. I think there's just too many things. Like, if this were a team that had a younger coach and an older, stronger GM where he just said, I don't care what anybody thinks, I'm going to do it, it might be the case. But they have the opposite. And so because it's the opposite, I don't think it's going to work. Because I think if you ask Mike Babcock, he wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to be very curious to see what team decides to say, I'm going to take a chance.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's going to be one of the smaller markets. I do. I think that's where it's going to go. The amount of compensation will be interesting. I mean, that's something where it probably will be a conditional pick. That's my guess.
Yeah, conditional makes sense because how many games he plays, how effective he is. Yeah, yep. that adds up. Just a couple things here coming out of the the precursor of the Stanley Cup final. A lot of little trivial things. I mentioned yesterday the Alex Pietrangelo, David Backes sort of interaction. They're buddies from back in the day when Backes was with the Blues, but Backes is basically shut down communication between the two. I know that obviously they're for the next couple of weeks they're going to be sworn enemies. I found this interesting. Saw that there was some questions about to Jordan Binnington. I almost said Craig Billington.
Yeah.
Jordan Binnington about the fact that he played with Providence last year, and Bruce Cassidy was indicating that might be an advantage for the Bruins, that they saw him firsthand with Providence, and
no advantage, zero.
Binnington sort of scoffed at that, and I guess Patrick Maroon was in the stall next to him and sort of laughed at it. So
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, so the chicanery has sort of started, and honestly, it's like I most people wish this series would have started already. It's not starting until Monday. Media day is not until Sunday. So I think right now we're just connected up with the trivial here and re-reporting like what the status of Zdeno Chara is, and the fact that Brad Marchand jammed his hand in the
scrimmage.
So
I would just say this. The difference between Jordan Binnington now compared to the Jordan Binnington in Providence is that big wall of defense he has in front of him.
Yeah. Hey,
guys.
Hey.
How are you? Sorry about the delay. I can stay until about 2:00. So
yeah, we're ending right at 2. So that's cool.
That's fine. We will end right at 2. All right. Family stuff today, but I wanted to get on because there's a lot of stuff happening. And I know you probably got into some of the rumors already.
Yeah, we talked we talked about
Okay.
the Kessel rumors from yesterday. If you have anything to add about that, we just talked about Voinov. I don't know if you want to go down that road.
Well, let me talk about Kessel for a second because now I didn't see the other rumors. I mean, I've heard I guess the Minnesota Wild rumors are out there, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so it's the ones that are being reported are Zucker,
Rask.
and Rask for Johnson and Kessel, right?
Correct.
So the thing I think that you have to take into account for this is the fact that I think Pittsburgh is trying to set up to get PK Subban with this, and I think that's something that you have to that comes into play is the clearing of cap space for this feels definitively like they are looking, because talking to people, it's Hockey Canada obviously, and people in Hockey Canada, they're telling me that Kessel, that Crosby, who obviously has a lot of power in Pittsburgh, is actually very much on the PK Subban bandwagon, saying that he wants to actually. I'm going to fill this. Sorry, it's funny
because the assumption was last year, because there's always been rumors of a friendship between Crosby and Jack Johnson.
Well, yeah, no, there's no question. There's a friendship between those guys.
That the reason that Jack Johnson was signed to a long-term contract was because of Crosby, and now we see how how perilous that is, because Jack Johnson has dropped off considerably from his days in Columbus, and that contract is an albatross.
Yeah, no, there's no question.
I look at this. I get where Nashville might say we want more scoring, but I don't think they're going to trade Subban for Kessel straight up.
No. This is no. I don't think Nashville is going to trade. I don't think Subban. I'm saying that the Kessel trade to Minnesota happens, and Pittsburgh gets Subban in a different way. Like,
well, I mean,
we're not going to have many assets left. What are you going to trade?
No, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, you have to also remember that Subban's obviously a solid asset, but
the problem there, Rack, is that deal. If say that deal is the deal that happens, we were just mentioning this. It's a wash monetarily. Kessel makes 6.8, and Johnson makes a little over 3, and Zucker makes 5.5, and Rask makes 4. So it's basically a wash. So they don't open up cap space to be able to make a Subban deal unless they're trading a big contract to get Subban. And I don't think you're going to trade Letang for Subban. So that's sort of
no, that's not the point. No, I get it. No, listen, I don't know exactly what they're trading. Again, we can sit back and logically say this. All I know is that there are definitely 2 deals being talked about here. And from talking to Pittsburgh, talking to Nashville, I don't know what I don't know exactly how they're going to end up, and also remember that the deal we're looking at with Minnesota is the presumed deal. I don't know that that's exactly the deal. And I mean, that might be a salary wash, but then again, there might be a deal that's not a salary wash with Minnesota still. And the fact that and we don't know those things, but what I do know for a fact, 100%, is that the Penguins are pursuing PK Subban, and they're also talking to the Wild about moving Kessel there, not talking to Nashville about Kessel. So
and then Minnesota could be talking a separate deal to trade Zucker someplace else to open up space for Kessel. So it could be.
But heck, what we did talk about earlier is and we don't know because Kessel's not talking and Rutherford's not talking. Right. But I get the feeling that because Kessel didn't have the Wild on his list, that this is sort of like LeCavier getting talked about going to Montreal, and Kessel
very well might
doesn't want any part of it.
Yeah, very well might be, and that is something that has to be taken into account. And then there's also the name of Malkin that's still around, and it's not. And the funny thing about Malkin is, initially it was like, okay, there's no way it can happen, and then they actually came out and admitted it that they had talked about it. I don't know if they've admitted publicly, but they did admit it to people within the world that Malkin was, not untouchable. And then what I was told after that was that Malkin, that they did that to scare Malkin, that they wanted to give Malkin that was the current belief, right? That they were going to scare Malkin with it. And then when I looked into that more, further, I got the impression very much that wasn't the case, that Malkin actually had come to them and talked about leaving. And that wasn't the case, that they were trying to scare Malkin. And that rumor was spread out by some other people. So, I mean, it's the time of year we're in, of course, and what is, there's the only people that know this entire situation between Malkin and Rutherford are Malkin and Rutherford, really, honestly. And beyond that, Rutherford might want to spin it a certain way. Malkin's people might want to spin it another way. There's a lot of, remember that Malkin has part of all Russian players have there's a network of rumors that go along with Russian players that exist. Mm-hmm. And because they talk to people back home, and they also talk to their other friends who are Russians, and they also talk to their, and not all those players, not all their friends are Russians or hockey players. They're actually just some people. I know a lot of people that are just that are Russians that are friends with all the Russian hockey players. So it's like, and there's a whole, we've talked about before, there's a crazy network that goes on with that. But, it does seem like there's something. Now, I don't know that, I do believe firmly that the Predators would be very interested in Malkin. Now, whether or not we're talking,
any team would be.
Yeah, of course, any team would be interested. No, but the one thing people would first say is, okay, the Predators, that's a lot of money for the Predators to be putting out. The money is not that much different than PK's, right? It's basically the same. So the idea here is, not saying that that's a direct swap, but because I don't think it is at all. But at the same time, there's something. There's a lot going on between the Penguins and the Predators, and a lot, another 2 teams that there's a lot going on between are the Leafs and the Flyers. and I talked talking to the Flyers people just like an hour before now, right when I was putting my blog up, which I put up, that there's no question that the Leafs have interest in Gostisbehere. They've interest in Sanheim. They've got interest in, obviously, Provorov. That's not a deal that's going to happen, or it doesn't seem like it's going to happen now, but it could happen. Like we don't know. Provorov could. We've all talked about Provorov. Is very dicey in Philadelphia. Provorov situation, way more dicey.
I mean, that deal is taking a while.
Yeah, if this was the Eagles, the Provorov thing would be all they talk about on sports talk radio.
Oh yeah.
Like that's how weird this would be, like one of those situations, but because it's the Flyers, you're not getting this, talk about it all the time, but there's a problem there. There's a problem there. And
we heard the problem last season.
Yeah. And it's not just Provorov, it's McAvoy in Boston. And it's Werenski in Columbus. I mean, those three defensemen are sort of working. I'm not colluding together, but they're working together. Their agents are working together, and they're going to all wait to push the price up for each of them, is what it sounds like.
Two things with Malkin, though. He just was quoted beginning of the month saying this happens every year. I'm not nervous. And he's got a full no move. Like they can't do anything without his say so.
Right. And that's why it's pretty funny that that's why the rumors about them trying to scare Malkin were kind of weird. Like they can't really scare Malkin. And that's why I kept looking into it. I mean, Kevin Allen thought that was the case. There are a lot of people that thought that was the case. And I just couldn't find how Malkin would actually be scared. Now I know that one other time that Malkin had some issues with the Penguins was during the playoffs a couple years ago when they went and they eventually beat the Predators in the finals. But during the playoffs, there were a lot of rumors flying around about Malkin. Mm-hmm. And apparently in the middle of those playoffs, he did go in and say, I want to stay here and made that statement. I don't think the Penguins know really what Malkin wants 100%. I don't get the impression that they are 100% certain that that's where he wants to stay there. But I think Malkin is smart enough to say what he said, Russ, like that you're there and saying that. But at the same time, I also do firmly believe that Evgeny Malkin wants his own team at some point.
Well, I don't think this is an either or scenario with the Penguins. I think they're trading Kessel.
Yeah,
but they also
I think so too.
Might trade Malkin. If that's a wholesale change. And what Rutherford's got to be careful of here is the fact that all of a sudden you trade Malkin, you're a one-line team with Sidney Crosby as your only center. You don't have you don't have the luxury of we have Derek Brassard as our third line guy, or we have whoever, or Jordan Stahl.
Yeah, there's no center. They're moving into the ranks. They would have to trade with a center in mind in the trade,
right?
And that guy's never going to fill the shoes of Malkin. And you hope that the other piece is what you're really wanting. To me, I just would never do it.
Yeah, and I know that Rutherford is a fly by the seat of his pants general manager, and there's nobody really safe. But he's also smart, and I also don't think that he can write off unless he thinks Malkin is on the verge of being done, and he wants to get out of that contract before he falls off. That's the only reason I could see them saying, okay, let's try to trade him, and maybe he wants to go someplace else. If they think that he's reached the point where he's starting to slow down and he's not the player that he was, then I could see them being motivated to move him. But I don't think that's the case.
I think that you guys are missing.
I'll give you one scenario where if they moved out Kessel for younger assets that didn't cost them money and they signed Duchesne, then maybe I would go with you and say, okay, you know what? Maybe this could happen now. But that's what it would take. It would take something like that.
They'd have to have a Malkin replacement in place.
But that's not a difficult thing to do with the certain players that are available right now, and the fact that you're getting them into play with like Sidney Crosby or whatever. Bring in Duchesne. People want to play for the Penguins, but that's not a hard sell.
No, I agree with that.
And so I mean, some of your bigger guys, even Panarin. I mean, that I could see Panarin ending up there. Like there's a bunch of options there if Malkin's gone, that the Penguins can go in different directions. But I disagree, Mike. I agree with what you're saying, Mike. But I think that you're looking at it from the reverse angle, actually, from what it really is. Because I think what it really is here is Malkin's only leaving if Malkin wants to leave. Sure. That's what's happening, and it doesn't matter what the Penguins think. If they think he's on the upside or downside of his career, or whatever, Malkin controls the whole thing. But he won't. He's not the kind of guy. He's very, very conscious of his, of his perception. So he's not the kind of guy who's going to be quote unquote demanding a trade or anything like that. So if anything that's happening with Malkin is going to be happening way in the background.
I just heard that Panarin doesn't like Hermani brothers, so I don't think it's going to happen.
Like plates either.
there's so Bill C said incredibly highly doubt that Crosby wants PK Subban in the chat room, and I'm telling you, Bill, and I wish I could tell you exactly how, but if you trust me on anything, trust me on this. Okay, I know this for a fact, 100%. And I'm not saying that it makes a lot of logical sense or anything like that. I think it might, but you might think it doesn't. We could debate that till the cows come home. But the bottom line is Crosby does want PK Subban there. And I know that from a very, very, very good source.
Now let's just touch on the Philadelphia-Toronto connection there.
Yeah.
Because we do remember that before December the 1st, when the contract was signed, that Philadelphia was one of the teams that made inquiries about Nylander. I don't think that would. I think that's an indicator of who they would be targeting. Now, obviously, based on the MO of the Flyers, they might be interested in Nazem Kadri, and we know that the Flyers are looking for a number 2 center, and Kadri would fit because he plays like a jerk, and the Flyers like jerks, the players who play like jerks. But
yeah,
I don't know whether. I mean, Gostisbehere, and I told this to Russ yesterday. Gostisbehere is Jake Gardiner. He's another defensively, not inept. He's better than that, but he's an offense-first defenseman.
No question.
And he's under control, and I think those are things that the Leafs would like. But I also think that they're wary of that because they know the pitfalls of Jake Gardiner. And then, so if I were the Leafs, I would be focusing on a guy like Sanheim. But I'm not giving, it would have to be a lot more than Travis Sanheim in a deal for William Nylander. I think it'd probably have to be Sanheim and one of their better prospects like Morgan Frost.
No, that's a crate. They would never.
They wouldn't trade Morgan Frost straight up for Nylander. There's no reason they would trade Morgan Frost straight up.
They would hang up on Kyle Dubas.
And
they would absolutely.
Kyle Dubas will be asking for anybody who played for Sault Ste. Marie, so that
it cracks me up, like the Nylander value that you're putting on Nylander. It's just not there. I mean, he may have had a great World Championships just now. You guys have all been the first to say that doesn't mean anything, So it's like
season is not going to sabotage the value of a guy that there were 4 or 5 teams.
But it's more than that. He's the holdout. Also, remember Nylander. The Flyers know a little bit about the Nylanders. They're not like that's nothing.
Gostisbehere is coming off career low numbers too.
Yeah, it's rough year for Gostisbehere. And I'm not saying it would be Gostisbehere for Nylander straight up. You're not if you're talking about anything, you're talking about like a second round draft pick or something like that. But you're not talking like anything, any other, any like scoring prospect that will probably outscore Nylander in all likelihood. Plus Gostisbehere, it's not it's not.
We are talking about a guy who scored 60+ points in his first 2 years, and after missing training camp and missing 2 months of the season, he scores the equivalent of a 40-point year.
You need to show that you're a 60-point player again before you ask for that kind of stuff.
Well, then they're not going to want to trade him. Then this is if you're a team that's truly
they have to trade him. They have to either trade him or cap him. They can't wait.
I agree, but they're going to ask for what he's really worth, not
as much as they can get. They're going to ask for as much as they can get, obviously.
Right.
But what he is really worth is being really really. The Leafs have one opinion, and if you're expressing the Leafs' opinion of what he's really worth, so I'm telling you the Leafs have one opinion. If your opinion is what the Leafs' opinion is,
I'm expressing the opinion of teams that were interested in this guy before December 1st, and it was more than one. There was probably 4 or 5 teams who were willing to give up. I mean, the St. Louis Blues at that point were last place in the league, and Elliot Friedman reported they were willing to give up Alex Pietrangelo for William Nylander. Now that's because Pietrangelo's up; his contract is up after next year. But they were willing to give up a top pairing all-star defenseman.
That was until Nylander didn't train in the offseason.
Yeah, anything before December, before he played this year, is moot.
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does. It matters a ton.
Okay.
I mean, there's no way. I mean, there's no way you can say that this season, holdout, everything that happens throughout the holdout, the things that they were talking about through the holdout, the way he played after the holdout, all of that matters.
Well, this is the argument that Russ and I had yesterday. Who would get the most value back for the Leafs, Kadri or Nylander? And I continue to say it's Nylander because he's younger. He's locked up for 5 more years. The contract, they would pay the big bonus on July 1st. I mean, there's a number of factors, and his upside in terms of him being a scoring forward who could play center or wing is 70 to 75 points. Kadri Kadri is 28 or 29 years old. I still think he's going to be a good player for a few more years, but the questions about his self-control. And, I just think that you'll get more in a trade for a defenseman for Nylander than you will for Kadri.
Kadri is a definite center. Okay. Nylander is questionable as a center. Okay.
Right.
Gostisbehere was runner-up for Rookie of the Year. And if you want to if you want to just exclude last year, let's just go back 2 years ago to Nylander and Gostisbehere, where they both were
one Rookie of the Year. Doesn't mean just because you're in the running or you're
no, but I'm saying that you're talking about a guy who was like, sure. if you take away this year for Gostisbehere, his value goes up.
I mean, even Gostisbehere was 10th in the Norris last year. I get. But
yeah, I mean, so you got to take away last year for both of them. Last year was a down year for both of them. All right, so if you took away both of them for last year and went back to just before, at the end of 2 years ago, the Gostisbehere Nylander talk doesn't sound insane.
Russ, would you, if you're Toronto, would you do Gostisbehere for Nylander?
If I'm Toronto, they might, simply because they have to clear up the cap situation. Gostisbehere is a known quantity pay-wise. They'll believe they can get him back to at least 12 goals and 50 points. So yes, I think they would.
Would you?
Would I? Yeah, because I'm getting back a defenseman. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting.
Yeah, listen, I'm the first to be critical of Gostisbehere this year. He was terrible at times, but a lot of that had to do with two different systems, a lot of crazy stuff going on, and I think that he was better, once the new system came in. And I think he's also a character guy. Like the difference between Gostisbehere and Nylander right now is that Gostisbehere is not considered the same kind of, like Nylander is a Nylander right now, and there's a reputation that goes around the NHL with that. I personally would rather have Kapanen than Nylander. I'd rather have Kapanen, but
they're not trading Kapanen unless they get. I don't know if they would trade Kapanen for Gostisbehere. I don't think so.
I think that would be a very fair trade.
It's silly now, I do.
Yeah, you are. You really are.
From the point of view of the Leafs, in terms of budget, they can sign Kapanen, because Kapanen basically he had a 7-goal year and then he scored 20 for the first time. So he's got 1 year. They can sign him on a bridge deal for like 2 years for like $2.5 million. I think that they're going to get that kind of deal done. And if you trade Nylander, or you're going to trade one or the other, you're going to keep the guy who you're paying $2.5 million to, who you got 20 goals out of.
So $2.5 million for Kapanen. How much is it going to cost you to get a 50 to 65 point defenseman?
Yes.
How much money?
Oh God, $6.5 to $7 million.
Right.
Right, and you have to trade the $6.9 million salary of Nylander to be able to fit that guy under the cap.
Not if it's Gostisbehere, he's relatively reasonable.
Right.
Yeah, but you're not.
If you're 50, you're looking at a 50. You're looking at a reasonable defenseman.
By trade, you're not creating enough space by trading Kapanen, who was on an ELC.
No, but it's not about ELC. It's where you're going with him. It's
right. I'm saying, you only paid him less than $1 million this year. You're going to pay him based on what he made after a 20-goal year. You're probably going to get him because he's going to be a bridge deal. You're probably going to get him for under $3 million, probably around 2.5. You're going to get Janssen for the same amount of money. Okay, so you're going to get Janssen and Kapanen, who both scored 20 goals. For less than you're paying Nylander. That means you're not trading those guys. They're trading.
Well, if I'm offer sheeting Kapanen $2.8 million, then all right.
The Leafs will match.
But you're just saying they want to. But there's a point at which they won't, right? So will they match at $4 million a year? Because Kapanen, see, the problem with the offer sheet obviously is ridiculous, right? But there are teams out there, like if Kapanen was a free agent right now,
sure.
If he was a UFA right now, he'd be getting at least $4 at least.
Right, but he's not, so he isn't.
But he's not. But yet somebody, but if you're Kapanen, you're looking at like, okay, am I going to take $2.5 million?
Why not? He hasn't proved anything yet. He's had 1 year.
I think he will. I think the kind of guy he probably will. But I think that at the same time,
he likes it in Toronto, and he likes he sees where this team is going. He's gonna play with Austin Matthews or John Tavares next year, and he'll set himself up for a big contract. If he signs a 2-year bridge deal, he's setting himself to make up big money in 2 years.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see. We got to go at 2:00. But did you guys do your picks for this thing? 'Cause we're not meeting on Monday.
Okay. I picked the Bruins in 6.
Okay.
But I think that, obviously it's going to be a close series. I think it's going to be Bruins in 6, but I hope it's the Blues.
I'm
Okay.
going Bruins in 7. I would have picked the Blues if Vince Dunn was completely healthy. Now that he's got his jaw wired shut and he would have to wear a cage, by the time he gets in there, he's going to lose weight. I think that was the one thing that may have put him over the top. So I'm going to go Bruins in 7, but I do think this will be one of the better cups we've seen in a while.
I do too. I'm going Blues in 7.
Of course.
No, I was ahead of time. I'll tell you that flat out.
Okay.
I mean, I've been bordering. The only decision is me is Blues in 6 or Blues in 7. Like I think it's really hard. I go back and forth on that because I honestly think that this is the best team that the Bruins have played so far. I really do. I think this is the best team they played so far.
I agree.
And and they went 7 with Toronto. That was a tough series. They went 6 with Columbus, and Columbus, wasn't a great team at all. But they also had and Columbus could have gotten better. They sort of fell apart in that series. They really did hand that to Boston. So and then they had this really ridiculous series with Carolina. So I think that at the end of the day, and the Blues, I mean, the Blues played the Dallas Stars, which I think the Stars are very, very similar to the Bruins in a lot of ways. The way they play, that's the kind of series I think you're going to see. Like that was a double overtime
defense than the Stars, and that's the thing. They're pushed from the blue line. The guys take up a lot of space. They have a lot of reach. That's where the Blues really come in. Jaden Schwartz is one of the hottest goal scorers in the playoffs, so he's going to be heard from. Tarasenko's woken up. So that's why this is going to – the Bruins have their hands full here. I'm literally taking Boston on the strength of Tuukka Rask and home ice.
Yes.
Yeah, and Tuukka Rask could be the difference, but I think both goalies are going to be really good. So I don't know. It's like – and Raska's time off, like that's the question. Raska's has a history of being streaky, so we got to see if this could potentially mess up Rask. It really could.
It's a possibility.
If that happens, then all bets are off. So this has to be. It's going to be won by the goalies. I think. I think Braden Schen's going to have a big series. He started to come on in the last series too. I really think that he's a kind of an underrated guy for them. He finally scored, but he had so many chances to score in the playoffs. I think he's going to be very impressive. Backus will be interesting because of the whole story, obviously there. It's interesting. So the last thing I'll say is I was going back with one of my Blues friends. I was texting him, and I hadn't texted him all year for a long time. And the last time I texted him, it turned out, was when the rumor was going around about Nylander. And we were talking about the Blues and Nylander and the Peter Angelo thing. And he's like, man, I wish someone would take Bouwmeester. And that this text was like way back then in December, and it's amazing how much they wanted Bouwmeester out of there. Like reading the text, I'm like, man, looking at your text, the last text you sent me was just railing on you. Give anything to just like you would drive Bouwmeester to the airport essentially if they could get rid of him.
He was about 2 days from being placed on waivers.
We didn't know about his injury. That's the thing. We didn't know about his injury and that he actually had just gotten over the hump with that. I think we all would have changed our tune otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, it's an amazing. I mean, what an incredible turnaround for the Blues, but Bouwmeester in particular, just like an incredible turnaround. All right, guys.
I'm going Jake DeBrusk as the Conn Smythe. That's what I'm going to go with.
Jake DeBrusk is Conn Smythe. Oh, it's interesting.
I think he's going to have a big series.
I'm going to go with Binnington.
What's this for? The key player?
Conn Smythe.
Tuukka Rask.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
If he wins it, if he loses it, he might not be.
It's very easy to go with the goalies, obviously, but.
I'm being consistent with my pick. I have the Bruins winning. If they win, I think it's going to be Rask.
And I think, if the Blues win, it's going to be Binnington. It's got to be. It's like
outside chance of Marchand, but I don't know if Gary Bettman wants to be slashed or slew-footed when he's handed the Conn Smythe trophy.
Yeah. I mean, these two teams played each other once during the year. They each won a game. And they were the last one, the most recent one being won by the Blues 2-1 in overtime. When the Blues were playing well, the Bruins were playing well. And I think that's the kind of game you're going to see.
I think that's what we will see.
It was like, it was a really good game. It's I've watched it a lot. I've had it like on repeat up here in my office on that screen over there, just looking up, and I've seen like lots of different moments where you catch the Blues and the Bruins playing, and they really are similar teams. And
I think Bergeron versus O'Reilly is a massive matchup. Like that
is an incredible matchup. Yeah, I do agree. And Parayko, it's going to be fun. Like to see if Marchand can get under Parayko's skin. I think that's another one we're going to watch because he's going to go after Parayko because he's younger and he's going to try to get to him. And I bet you we're going to see a Braden Schenn, Brad Marchand battle at some point. I would really if someone's going to try to take out Marchand, it would be Braden Schenn.
If Braden Schenn scores like 3 goals in the Stanley Cup, Flyers fans are going to be some that are going to start questioning things.
Oh, I know. Believe me. I mean, I've always been a Schenn fan, and even before he was a Flyer, and I think that he actually is as a as a playoff guy has been really good in general. And this year he's been great. It just says he's only scored a goal, but he's been great in that series and throughout the playoffs. We're going to see great things from him. It's going to be a fun series. It's going to be very back and forth. And I hope that the layoff doesn't affect him in game one. That's all I can say.
I agree. I hope that.
Right, we'll see you guys on the weekend. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, guys. Enjoy it. It's first weekend of summer. I'm going to be posting like crazy because the rumors are flying around. So just I'll be I'll be waving to my family on the beach in Margate as they play, and I'll be in my office. So we'll talk this weekend. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Talk to you then.